Welcome to the Positive Spiritual Living Podcast, brought to you by Unity on the Bay. This is your positive path for spiritual living.
It was more than 20 years ago that I first came across the pages of this little tiny book, subtitled A Practical Guide to Personal Freedom, The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. How many of you have read this book? That is very heartwarming to me. Let me tell you that I've read it several times now. I've taught it many times. And I've come to the conclusion after this last reading that if you really get the content of the few pages in this book, if you really get it, you're going to be home free. Because everything you need to know about living the way in which you are designed to live is contained within the pages of this book. We started last week our adventure, and we're continuing again this morning and for the next several weeks. I just want to offer you a brief overview of these four agreements before I get into the one that we're going to be discussing this morning. First of all, don't take anything personally, and I know nobody in the room ever takes anything personally. You know, as Spirit would have it, we're going to be talking about that subject next week, and our guest speaker is going to be the amazing Martha Creek. If anybody can preach to us on the subject of not taking anything personally, it will be Martha. So she'll be here next week as our guest speaker, and also she'll be doing a public workshop that you're invited to join us for on the following Monday night. So don't take anything personally. Don't make any assumptions. These are all a piece of cake, a walk in the park, right? Don't make any assumptions. Nobody in the room ever makes assumptions. I certainly never make assumptions. He lied. We make them all the time, don't we? We're always making assumptions. We're drawing conclusions in our minds. And most of the time, they're not very positive conclusions because there's a tendency in our human conditioning to always look toward the worst. So we don't want to make any assumptions. From now on, we want to take everything that we are assuming into the center of our being and see if it resonates there as being true for us. And you know, something can be completely true for somebody else, and that doesn't mean it holds an ounce of truth for you, because truth is different for every individual. If you haven't noticed, none of us are quite the same. And sometimes that's a little difficult and trying, deals with our patience factor, but the reality is it is the single most beautiful quality that the human family possesses. We are all different, and we don't have to be afraid of that. In fact, when we come in this room on Sundays, we can celebrate it. And if we can celebrate it for 75 minutes on a Sunday morning in this room, we can start to begin to celebrate it on an ongoing basis around this entire globe. I think that's what we're here for. I think what this awakening is all about. And finally, always do your best. And if you're like me, and I imagine we have a little bit in common, there's some days when you put your head on the pillow and you think, God, what a beautiful day. I couldn't have played it any better. It was just an exquisite day. And then there are other evenings when it's like, what the hell happened to me today? Because your best varies from day to day, doesn't it? You give it your best shot, and then you know you gave it your best shot, and you don't go around beating yourself up for, I could have done it better, or I could have done it differently, or why I didn't know, or my mother used to say, woulda, shoulda, coulda, which never does anything except should on you. Listen carefully. Above reproach. Now, this morning, we get to talk about the single most important of the four agreements. It's actually the first, but I waited until last to share it with you. And it's this: be impeccable with your word. Be impeccable with your word. And I went to the co-founder of the Unity Movement, Charles Fillmore, some words about words that he shares. He says this: words are the vehicles through which ideas make themselves manifest. Words are the vehicles. So words are the means of transportation through which ideas become living realities in your day-to-day experience. Your words have a vibratory, energetic content. Words and the meaning and the power and the emotion behind them. So every word you send out, this is both liberating and terrifying, if you want to be honest. Every word that you send out, every word that you speak is creating your experience of reality. And I emphasize those words, your experience of reality. Because the ultimate spiritual reality is that you are right now in this moment and in every moment dwelling in the kingdom of God, and you are made in the image and likeness of God. If you woke up this morning and you had difficulty believing that, it's only because through the power of your ideas, the content of your mind, and through the expression of that content by means of the words that you are speaking, you're creating a reality or an experience of reality that is not in sync with divine reality. Are you with me on this? You see, you have free will. You can create any kind of experience that you want. What you want in the heart of hearts is to align your experience with this divine reality. And the way that you do that is through your words, through the dialogue you are having with yourself and the dialogue that you are entertaining with others. The dialogue that takes place in yourself, of course, we're all familiar with. There's that ongoing recitation. Quite often, to be really honest, it can be harshly judgmental. Have you noticed? It holds a level, an expectation, a standard within you. It's sort of a ruthless judge. And when your behavior doesn't measure up to that, it condemns you, it persecutes you, it prosecutes you, it judges you, and you land in prison. You land in a prison of your own making. But you are free to change this internal dialogue by beginning to observe it. So watch very carefully the internal dialogue that you are having with yourself, which so often turns out to be the seeds from which your dialogue with others is born. You start with the internal dialogue. What am I saying to myself? And to what degree is it aligned with the divine reality that I know to be the case, that I am made in the image and the likeness of God, that I am perfect? You're not striving to be perfect. Have you noticed that when you strive to be perfect, you're always striving? Because you can never strive enough to be perfect. Why is that? Because perfect is what you already are. You are perfect in the mind of God, in the heart of God, right now in this moment. So we begin to be aware of that dialogue, and then we start to very carefully monitor what's coming out of this trap, what's being ushered across the threshold of our lips every day. What are we saying about ourselves? What are we saying about other people? And specifically, he spends a lot of time in the pages of this book talking about the number one dis-ease amongst humanity, and that is gossip. Gossip. Talking about other people behind their back, and typically in a negative fashion. Friends, that's as poisonous as anything gets, and it doesn't impact anybody except you, because that's rolling out of you. And when that kind of information, that kind of analysis is rolling out of you, trust me, it's rolling back to you in the form of the experience that you are creating. Because you have all of these little transportation vehicles, as Charles Fillmore calls them. Little buses, trains, automobiles, airplanes are coming out of your mouth all the time. Just imagine that. Every single word is a transportation device. And do you know what it is transporting? Your experience of day-to-day reality. So you are creating your experience by virtue of the words that you are entertaining silently inside of your head, and also the ones that are coming out to be shared with others. You may know that in Unity we believe in all Christian doctrine, but we believe in it metaphysically interpreted, because we believe that when you metaphysically interpret Christian doctrine, it really is no longer Christian. When you metaphysically interpret Christian doctrine, it becomes universal spiritual principle. Take the brand name off of it, and you have universal spiritual principle. And you will find that universal spiritual principle everywhere. On November 4th, we're going to be having an interfaith service here. And prelude to that, a number of us visited the Greater Miami Islamic Center in Miami Gardens on Friday, last Friday. It was one of the most memorable and moving experiences of my life. Even now, just remembering it is very emotional for me, because as I saw this gathering of hundreds of individuals coming together, not with the great music that we enjoy and not with the fanfare, but simply out of devotion to God, they come together. And the imam spoke so highly of us during this experience. He talked about you. He talked about unity on the bay. He talked about transcending the boundaries that are created when we say, I'm Islamic, I'm Jewish, I'm Christian, whatever it may be. And there was a spirit of unity. My friends, we were treated like royalty. Very infrequently have I received that kind of a warm reception. So my point is that while it is easy for the internal dialogue and the external dialogue to talk about differences and conflicts and fears and woes, none of that is aligned with the spiritual reality of who we are as a human family. And it is possible for you right now this morning to be one of the agents that begins breaking down these differences of opinion that are based only on perception and getting beyond Christian doctrine, Jewish doctrine, Islamic doctrine to universal spiritual principle that helps us to remember we are all in this together. I actually have no idea where that came from. It is not in my notes. It was based purely on experience, but it was truth. It was truth. Very, very moving. And I've never been to, now I'm completely drawing a blank. Mosque, thank you. I've never been to a mosque before. It really opened my eyes. And these people were coming up individually, shaking every one of our hands. It was really a powerful experience and made me realize we are all members of one family, and that's called humanity. All right. Now, to get back to Christian doctrine, metaphysically interpreted, I want to talk to you about a word that we don't mention very often from this platform because it has kind of a sting to it, because it's a word that was used in a lot of cases to set us up for control and failure. And the word is this: sin. Doesn't that have a sting to it? I mean, I don't know what your previous life conditioning was, but typically sin is not a very good thing. And in fact, even when it's metaphysically interpreted, it's not a very good thing, because the end result is you recognize that you're a sinner, and everybody probably around you is also a sinner. But it's not sin in the sense that you have defined it in the past. Listen to the words of Don Miguel Ruiz in the Four Agreements when he gives you a new way of looking at this sin that has a sting to it. He says, a sin is anything you do which goes against yourself. Being impeccable is not going against yourself. When you are impeccable, you take responsibility for your actions, but you do not judge or blame yourself. The word impeccable actually is of Latin origin, and it means without sin. So if you want to live a life that is without sin, it means simply that you have to stop going against yourself. And it helps to stop going against others either, by speaking lies about them, by saying that they're frail if you think they're in a sickly condition, by thinking that they're vulnerable to human conditions and woes and poor circumstances, by believing about yourself that you don't measure up, that you're not enough. That's one I held on to for a long time, and I am more and more every day gladly and joyously releasing it because it goes against me. So I invite you to look at the dialogue, internal and external dialogue that you're having, and say, am I speaking in support of myself? Am I speaking in support of others? Am I speaking in support of humanity and life on this planet? Or am I speaking against it? And right now, my friends, it's as easy, if not easier, to speak against things than it is to speak for things. And every time you speak against something, you are not being impeccable with your word. You are being out of alignment with what you could see if you chose. You could alter your experience from day to day by altering the storyline that you're telling. The story that you tell, I just mentioned this a few weeks ago. The story you tell will always be the life that you live. So it behooves us to become aware of this dialogue, internal and external. What am I saying about myself? And not to judge us or condemn us or punish us when we fall out of line with it, just realize to ourselves, I'm simply speaking out of accord. My word is not impeccable. When we talk about word, in this case, it has nothing to do with giving your word to anybody else, except by means of the vehicles of transportation that you are sending out through the energy of your spoken words about those people or about yourself. And the popular opinion right now is that there are a lot of groups out here to come down on. We need to condemn them. We need to condemn their actions. We need to put out vile words about what they're doing. I'm telling you right now, if you want to strengthen the division, the divisiveness that you're experiencing, if you want to strengthen that which you perceive to be evil in the world, just keep talking about it. And keep talking about it and pull other people together and get all together and talk about it and generate more of it. Or stop in your tracks lovingly and gently. Wow, I'm definitely going down a road here where I am bad-mouthing another person or a group of people or a situation, and I do not want to contribute to that, so I'm not going to energize it by means of the words that I'm speaking. I'm going to change my dialogue. I can say that no matter how I'm perceiving the situation, the reality is, number one unity principle, there's only one presence, there's only one power, it's God, and it's good no matter what I think about it. And I'm going to align all these little vehicles of transportation that are delivering my experience of day-to-day reality to me, I'm going to align them with ultimate divine reality. I guarantee you, my friends, if you can do this for just a day, stop yourself in your tracks when your dialogue, internal or external, is going down one of those muddy, rocky roads. Stop it in your tracks, realign your thinking, realign the ideas that are in your mind, and set them up in accord with divine reality that in your heart of hearts you know is true. You're going to change your experience, and you're going to change it quickly. Because the only reason your experience is what it is right now is because you are empowering it through the energetic vibration of your words that is delivering a given experience into your day-to-day activities. In the book of John, this is the 8th chapter, 1st through 11th verses. There's a story that most of us are familiar with. It has to do with an adulteress who was caught and more or less sentenced by a number of others. And she was put into the center of a circle so that an unbelievable punishment could be inflicted upon her. And most of you know that punishment was stoning. And we've heard that story a lot, but if you really think about a person being stoned to death, it's merciless. It's crazy. And into this situation walks Jesus, observing this dynamic going on. And he says simply, excuse me, guys, but I'd like for the first one of you that is without sin to cast a stone. None of them did anything but put their stones down. Because they realized that, especially if you take on this understanding of sin simply being the act of going against yourself, we're all doing it every day. That's why I say, we're a pack of sinners, but don't take it too seriously. All you have to do is change that. Sin isn't going against God, but sin could be going against what God has created. And that's you, and you, and you, and you. God has created you. We don't have to go against it any longer. What did Jesus tell that woman? As you see, no one here can condemn you because they have recognized their perceived fault in themselves. So they're not going to condemn you, and I'm not going to condemn you. And then the most powerful words he says in that story, go and sin no more. So what I'm asking you this morning, in both a metaphysically Christian way, as well as in a sense a traditional Christian way, is to go and sin no more. To all of us, let's go. Let's leave this room and let's don't sin anymore. Let's don't keep talking ourselves down. The number one mortal sin, do you know what that is? It's to reject yourself. So stop rejecting yourself, because when you reject yourself, you're rejecting God. You're made in you are an exquisite replication of the perfection of God. And every time you talk yourself down, you're not supporting that. You're sinning against yourself, you see. And the way to end that is to change that dialogue. No matter what my internal chatter is telling me, I know who I am. I know the strength that indwells me, the peace and the power that indwells me. And I see a world where more and more of those kinds of representatives are needed. And don't you know that all the entanglements of the world in our country right now are there but for one reason, and that is to get us to realize what our sinful internal dialogue and external dialogue has been creating and change it. If you want to be an agent for change, be an agent for changing the story that you're telling. My friends, leave this room with one promise to yourself and to the world. I am going to watch my words, every one of them, whether they're spoken or whether they're silently recited inside of myself. I'm going to watch my words, and when I'm out of alignment, I'm going to step right back in. Why? Because I want my experience and the experience of the whole human family to be impeccable. God bless you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Positive Spiritual Living Podcast, brought to you by Unity on the Bay, a spiritual community located in Miami, Florida. Unity on the Bay is supported by the generosity of its community. If you'd like to make a donation or learn more about Unity on the Bay, please visit unityonthebay.org. You can also follow Unity on the Bay on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for even more positive spiritual inspiration. Until next time, thanks for listening and many blessings. Namaste.